On March 3, 2020, the Reserve Bank of Australia became the first central bank to cut interest rates in response to the outbreak. Official interest rates were cut by 0.25% to a record low of 0.5%. On 12th of March, the federal government announced a planned $17.6 billion Australian dollars stimulus package. The package consists of multiple parts: a one-off payment to pensioners, Social Security recipients, veteran and other income support recipients and eligible concession card holders, payments of odd 2,025,000 Australian dollars to affected small businesses, an increase to the threshold for the instant asset write-off program, tax concessions for investments, a small business 50% wage subsidy for 120,000 trainees and apprentices, and 1 billion Australian dollars in subsidies for heavily affected industries. On 17th of March, the New South Wales government announced a 2.3 billion Australian dollars stimulus package, including 700 million Australian dollars for health services. 450 million Australian dollars was allocated to waive payroll tax for 3 months, and $250 million was allocated so state-owned buildings and public schools could employ more cleaners. $750 million was allocated for capital works and public asset maintenance. On 18th of March, the Northern Territory government announced an economic stimulus package of $60 million. On 19th of March, the Reserve Bank again cut interest rates by a further 0.25%, from 0.5% to 0.25%, the lowest in Australian history. In March 2020, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, ABS, began releasing a number of additional statistical products to assess the economic impacts on the outbreak on the Australian economy. Data on retail trade turnover indicated a 0.4% rise in turnover in February 2020. Negative effects on some areas of the retail sector, particularly tourism-dependent businesses, were offset by a rise in food retail turnover, with supermarkets showing a large rise in sales, mainly arising from panic buying. On 22nd of March, the federal government announced a second stimulus package of 66 billion Australian dollars, increasing the amount of total financial package offered to 89 billion Australian dollars. This included several new measures like an extra 550 Australian dollars coronavirus supplement payment to those on income support, paid from 27 April to September 24, 2020, and relaxed eligibility criteria for individuals on job seeker payment, granting 100,000 Australian dollars to small and medium-sized businesses and 715 million Australian dollars to Australian airports and airlines. It also allowed individuals affected by the outbreak to access up to 10,000 Australian dollars of their superannuation during 2019 to 2020 and also being able to take an additional same amount for the next year. On 30th of March, the Australian government announced a 6-month, 130 billion Australian dollars JobKeeper payment. The JobKeeper payment provides businesses with up to 1,500 Australian dollars a fortnight per full-time or part-time employee, or casual employee that has worked for the business for over a year. To be eligible, a business with an annual revenue of under 1 billion Australian dollars must have lost 30% turnover since 1 March, or 50% for businesses over 1 billion Australian dollars. The entire payment made to businesses for an employee must then, by law, be paid to that employee in lieu of normal pay. This response came after the enormous job losses seen just a week prior when an estimated 1 million Australians lost their jobs. The program was backdated to 1st of March with the aim of re-employing many people who had lost their jobs in the weeks before. In the first hour of the scheme, over 8,000 businesses registered to receive the payments. The program is one of the largest economic packages ever implemented in modern Australian history. JobKeeper ended on March 28, 2021. On 11th of April, the South Australian state government announced its own 350 million Australian dollars economic stimulus measures. In late April, the federal government announced 94.6 million Australian dollars of support was available for zoos, wildlife parks and aquariums forced to close by coronavirus restrictions. This was part of previously announced economic stimulus measures. The 2020 federal budget, normally delivered in May, was delayed until 6 October because of the COVID-19 pandemic. On May 22, 2020, the Treasury and Australian Taxation Office announced there had been a miscalculation of 60 billion Australian dollars in the planned cost of the JobKeeper program. Blaming 1,000 businesses for making significant errors on the application form, the Australian government revealed it had over-budgeted the program, and that it was forecast to cost 70 billion Australian dollars, not 130 billion Australian dollars. The Treasury also announced that its original forecast of 6.5 million recipients was inaccurate, and closer to 3.5 million. Prime Minister Scott Morrison celebrated the saving, while the opposition announced a parliamentary inquiry in an attempt to compel Treasurer Josh Frydenberg to explain the overestimation. In July 2020, Australian Finance Minister Matthias Cormann, in an interview with the US CNBC News channel, vowed that the government